Gloomwood is shaping up to be one of my favorite indie games this year, and while for most people you'll probably be able to get through the game on your first run in about 2 hours or less, I've actually been going through this game over and over and over again, and it feels like every time I play through it, I end up finding like a new secret. So that's what today's video is about. I'm going to be sharing with you guys tips and tricks that I ended up learning while playing Gloomwood. These are going to range from extremely common to very, very obscure. So just in case you're curious of what this game is, it's going to end up being a stealth game, and this little ring that we have on our character, you can see as I'm moving really, really fast in a light area, enemies can see me very easily. But if I end up slowing down, you can see that I become a little less obvious, and if I go into complete darkness, now I'm suddenly entirely invisible. Unless I start moving around quicker, you can see my ring starts to light up. This is going to be our primary indicator to tell whether or not we're being spotted. So at the beginning of the game, there is this intended pathway right here, but you can actually climb right up here. If you end up holding the jump button while you're at a ledge, you will end up vaulting over, and you could end up going towards that guard, but we don't really have any way of defending ourselves right now. And there's also going to end up being this window here that we could break out, but once again, we don't have arcane swords. So we're going to go through the intended pathway. So we grab our briefcase, we go into this room right here, and then we're going to grab his key right here and go into this room over here, the power room or the generator room. Now I can give you guys the first quick tip. So if you have a door closed and happen to have the key for it, you can press R on the door and you'll hear a very, very subtle locking noise. So this door is actually locked, which means that enemies won't be able to pass through it and they'll have to break the door down in order to reach you. Another thing to keep in mind is that at any point in the game, you can press J to open up your journal, and this is where you'll be able to see your health and your mind. The mind doesn't seem to have any purpose in the game right now though. On this shelf right here, you're gonna notice this little red button, and if we press on a little bit further, we'll get our arcane sword as well as our first save point. Wait for this guard to show up, dispatch him, and you can notice that right here is the intended area where you can end up putting the button so that we could lower that elevator. But as you noticed previously, we can end up actually taking an alternate route at this point. And here's where things get a little interesting. So we can end up breaking this wood right here and going out this way, or if we go over to this guard, now we can finally take care of him. We could have lured him with bottles and stuff, but it doesn't really matter. And you'll notice that the elevator that is currently stuck at the top, we can actually lower it because now we have access to both buttons. But again, we're going to keep the button in our inventory. Or if we go a little bit further here and wait for these guards to get out of the room, you'll notice that this elevator is over here, and this will allow us to use that button that we were saving from earlier, giving us another means of escape. I also just recently found this trick, which allows you to skip the elevator completely without even needing the button. And if you know how the parkour works in this game, you can actually finesse your way up into these air vents and get outside. So now we're at the top of our jail cell, and we can actually hit this switch to lower a crane that gives us easy access out of there in case we fall down. But more specifically, and this is a bit tricky to do, we can jump from one chain to the next, and then we could just jump right out that window as another alternative means of escape. But for today's video, we're going to end up taking that first window sill that I mentioned earlier, because this is going to be relevant for the secret cave, which is right over here. You're going to notice that there is a little safe right here, which normally you end up finding this combination for this safe a lot later in your playthrough, but it's going to be 415 and is going to give us access to this unique weapon, which has 2 ammo types. I want to mention at this point that with all of the guns in the game, you can actually hold R to end up seeing whether or not you have ammo in the chamber. And with this gun in particular, you can press C to alternate swap the ammo type that you currently have. It's also important to note that you'll actually walk a lot slower when you have a weapon drawn, so as often as you can, you might want to end up putting it away so that you have a little bit more control. So the 2 ammo types are going to be as followed. Incendiary ammo, which will end up spreading between enemies so long as they end up touching each other. So usually it's good to end up saving your incendiary shot for when there's a whole bunch of enemies around. Usually they'll go into a panic and they'll end up coming close to each other naturally. But while the incendiary round is going to be good for offensive, the slug is going to be your defensive round for avoiding enemies, because you can end up shooting out lights. And more notably, if we come back to the generator room, we can actually shoot a slug through the grating system to hit the switch and hit the generator, which turns off power for the entire first area. Now, one disadvantage to this is that the power is out for everything, including elevators and switches. So this room that we're in, there is actually multiple pathways to as well. You could take this chain, you could put a bunch of boxes down here and boost yourself up, or you could end up getting a key to this doorway. This is where the game tries to teach you that there are light switches in very select areas, mind you, and we'll actually see the combination for the safe over here on the wall. This is going to be the first intended area where you can end up getting your hands on a pistol, but there are other areas where you could get one if you end up missing this safe. So now that we got some of the easier tricks out of the way, let's skip a little further ahead. So we're on top of the main roof here, and you might have noticed this tower. Currently, there's no way to end up opening this door, but if you end up moving these barrels in the proper spot, we can actually boost ourselves onto them, crouch, and go into this little alcove right here. So there's not much up here. There's going to be some health. There's going to be an alternate place that you can end up getting a pistol. There's also a treasure chest that doesn't seem to have anything. The only way that you can end up escaping is by jumping out of the window, because again, that door is completely locked. So once we end up getting over to this building, normally in most cases, you'll probably end up being down here and opening that big electric door. So when you end up opening this window, you can end up going through here and kind of sneaking around, but you might not have noticed that you can actually vault up onto the window and then easily get up onto the roof. Now, before we end up continuing on, there is a secret behind this waterfall. So you just end up going through here, and there's going to end up being this weird little cave that has a whole bunch of cheese, a note, and a treasure chest full of goodies. Normally you climb up the rope or climb up here to end up going into the next level, but if we end up vaulting up here, we can end up getting ourselves up onto the roof. You can go into the chimney, but I wouldn't recommend it because you might set yourself on fire, or you can end up coming over here. And then there's going to end up being this garden here that you can very easily just take care of. If I'm just very, very cautious here, you'll get a key for the front door, a save point, and another alternate area where you can end up getting your hands on a pistol. Now, at this point, you could end up crawling down here and going into the well and everything like that, which is going to end up being a shortcut later. But if we go down there now, the door is going to be locked from the other side. Now, another thing you might have noticed while going up to the mines is that these two idiots are just standing right there looking in the complete opposite direction of you. And I realized that the reason these guys are looking in the opposite direction is because from the beginning of the dock area, you could actually just swim all the way over here. And then on the other side where they're looking, there is a cliff face that you can end up climbing up. So if you do take that route, just make sure that you have some ammo or something to shoot the exploding barrel and take care of both of them. So when you end up getting into the mines, you'll have to open up this door and turn off the power generator so that you can press on. This is where you'll be greeted with a new enemy type, the dog, so make sure that you save a lot of your ammo for this situation. But I wanted to point out the fact that you're going to end up getting your hands on a lantern, because I know that on my first playthrough of this game, it was extremely dark, and I just wondered to myself over and over, is there a lantern? And yes, there most definitely is. Once you end up reaching this part of the cave, there's actually two alternate pathways. You could end up going up there, or you can end up parkouring your way down here. Just make sure that you end up dealing with this dog in a stealthy manner, because otherwise it can end up being troublesome. I mean, I guess you could always just jump right into the water and ignore him entirely. A little trick that you can do to deal with a lot of enemies as well is if you're crouched on the ground and at a little ledge, they won't be able to hit you. I don't know if this is going to end up being resolved at any point, but once you end up getting to this elevator, it's not going to work until we end up turning the power generator right back on. Also, I want to note that at this point, there's been all sorts of little tiny trinkets that you can find in the water and in other different areas. But as of right now, treasure doesn't really serve a purpose because we don't have the market district in the game right now. So now that we're out of the mines, I'm going to show you guys one of the hardest pieces of treasure that I ended up finding, because as I was in here, I noticed up there, it looks like there's something that you could end up reaching. And you in fact can, if you're very, very careful to put the barrel down in such a way that it doesn't fall off the ledge and crawl your way on top of it. You can just finesse your way up. And if we end up getting up here, we're going to end up finding a big jewel, which again doesn't serve a purpose right now. So I just wanted to show you guys that this cliff house right here, there is actually an alternate pathway down along the coast now, at least in the more recent updates. If you do end up taking the coastline, there's going to end up being this rope where you can end up going up and dealing with all of the normal cliff enemies and so on and so forth. But there is actually an alternative route. If you end up swimming all the way across here and going right over there, if you climb up this rock, you'll be able to get over to the new chapel area. This was the most recent spot that was added to the game. And while there's definitely a lot of goodies to be had down here, this pathway is going to end up being blocked. You'll have to unlock the shortcut by progressing forward, which means that the only way that you can get out of here is by climbing up the rope that is going to end up being right here. Now, I'm not exactly sure why, but there is a switch here that will end up pulling the rope up Just keep that in mind, because if you pull this rope up, it means that your only way of getting out of here is by going under the bridge and swimming back to the coast on the other side. Another handy trick you can do if you have incendiary rounds is shoot that guy all the way across. It'll set him on fire, and the building is very, very much filled with TNT and a lot of different guards. It'll end up helping you out a lot later on. Anyways, enough of that. Let's move on into the woods. Over here in this area, you're gonna notice these bear traps, and you probably didn't notice, or at least I didn't my first playthrough, that you can not only activate them with the F key to trigger them, but if you press it again, you can pick them up. But these traps will now end up grabbing enemies. They won't kill them immediately, but they will hold them still, so you can end up getting a backstab on them. Here, let me just go right into his face and just throw it into him. Hey, buddy. There we go. Also, a fun little fact is you can end up throwing items into the traps to trigger them, or you can just drag and drop an item out of your inventory depending on the weight of the item. Uh-oh. So for this next part, we're going to cheat a little bit using console commands. Inside the house that normally triggers the creature, we can actually use ghost or no clip to go through this wall, and you will notice that there is going to be this under development section. If we end up going inside here, there's nothing. There is no creature currently inside the building at all. Now, this gate too ended up prodding my imagination, and I was able to build up like a tower of barrels and climb over the wall, but through that, I ended up finding that there is in fact a legitimate way to end up getting back here. So when we end up getting into the lighthouse and coming down here into the basement, there's going to be this hidden switch behind this bookshelf. And then there's also going to end up being this weird creature. So when we end up going over here, let me turn ghost off. He's gonna run by and be all spooky. You can tag him with an incendiary ammo and he'll just kind of run around indefinitely on fire. But we can get a nice look at his character model. Now, last but not least, you might have noticed this right up here, which is the windowsill that it gets everybody's imagination running. Can I actually get up there? Well, you can, just not in the vanilla sense. So by cheating, we can end up getting up here and seeing that there's actually nothing. There's nothing in the city either. It's all just a facade. If you want to end up enabling the cheats yourself, you're going to end up going into the Gloomwood common file, and in the user ini, you'll have to set cheats to 1 and dev console to 1. Once you're in game, all you're going to do is hit tilde, and then you're going to end up being able to type help, and that'll end up showing you a list of various commands. Although the help command does end up showing you a list of commands, it doesn't end up telling you in detail how you can end up spawning each individual item. So there are forum posts on the Steam discussions right now that do discuss how you can end up spawning a pistol, what the item names are for some other console items that aren't in the game yet. But even if you don't want to end up cheating necessarily, one of the things that I found to be the most useful is you can always end up typing save game. That command is automatically going to save on your current character slot, and then you could always just type load game to load the same slot that you just saved, which kind of makes me question why it's taking the developers so long to add the Crescent Moon difficulty, because Crescent Moon difficulty is going to have Quicksave and Quickload, which we can already technically do with console commands. But if you ended up making it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this video helpful, and I would appreciate, before you end up leaving, if you could smash like, sub for more, and so on and so forth.